Welcome back to our Sunday School series on the book of Judges. This is lesson number 9, chapters 17 and 18 on Micah and the Levite. Where we are today in Judges is we're in chapters 17 and 18. And we have finished the cycle of the Judges and are moving into the last part of the book. And so I think you'll find this very interesting section. All right, as far as review is concerned, all I want to do is take a look at the outline of the book, because now we're in a new section of the book. So if you remember, this has taken us back a little bit. But the first part of the book is the prologue. This is from 1:1 to 3:6, where we learn about what's coming in the subsequent chapters. And we learn about the cycle of the Judges and some of the main themes that show up in the book. Now, the section that we just finished with Samson is the main body of the book. It's called the cycle of the Judges. And this is from 3:7 till the end of chapter 16. Which I believe ends at verse 31. And so this took us through all of our judges, starting with Othniel. We had 12 judges, 7 major judges. Samson was the last. And we went through this downward spiral throughout the book as things progressed and got worse and evil grew more profound. Now we're in the final part of the book, the epilogue. And this takes us from 17:1 through the end of chapter 21, which ends with verse 25. And there are 2 primary sections in the epilogue. The first section is going to continue the theme of our downward spiral into darkness. And the first one, where we are today, has to do with the religious corruption of the people. And that's 17 and 18. Now, where the book is going to end is with moral corruption. And that's chapters 19 through 21. So here we are today. We're in the epilogue, the final closing chapters of the book, and we're in the subsection on religious corruption among the people of Israel. Any thoughts or questions about this idea? Does anybody remember if you had to use one sentence to tell us a theme of the book of Judges, what would that sentence be?
Support for the kingdom of David.
Okay, that would be the major underlying theme, right? To point to the need for a Davidic king to sit on the throne. And there's another important theme that we're going to see show up in the book today, and it's the phrase, there was no king in Israel in those days, so everyone did what was right in their own eyes. That's right. Okay, so turn to chapter 17, and we'll start reading. This section is on Micah and the Levite. Chapter 17 of Judges. Here we go. Verse 1. There was a man of the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah. Now, I want to stop right here for a second, because we always take a look at these names. Micah is an abbreviation of a longer name, Micaiah. And this name means who is like Yahweh, Micaiah. But when you shorten the name to Micah, it actually means something like this: who is dimming, or who is a coward. That is basically who's an idiot or who's a coward. And so, whenever we see names in Scripture, it's giving us a clue about what's coming, or about this person, or about the context in which we read about them. So this particular Micah is an idiot and a coward, as you will see. So this is how the story is starting with this name. There was a man in the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah. And as we go through this story, see how many of the 10 Commandments are broken in this story, all right? We'll kind of try to track them as we go along. We'll keep a track on them. Now, verse 2. He said to his mother, "The 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, and also spoke it in my ears, behold, the silver is with me, I took it." Now there's an interesting connection between this verse and the previous story, and it's this number, 1,100 pieces of silver. In the story of Samson, we see the exact same number of pieces of silver. Do you remember where? In Samson's story? It's Delilah will betray Samson. The Philistine leaders promise her 1,100 pieces of silver each. Okay? So Delilah betrays the deliverer of Israel for 1,100 pieces of silver. And now we're going to see Micah is going to betray Yahweh with this 1,100 pieces of silver also. Just interesting that the number of pieces of silver here is the same, because it's communicating also the same action on behalf of those who use the silver. Verse 3. At the end of verse 2, his mother says, "Blessed be my son by Yahweh." And he restored the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother, and his mother said, "I dedicate the silver to Yahweh from my hand for my son, to make a carved image and a metal image. Now therefore I will restore it to you." Right, this is so convoluted. Right? This really illustrates the confusion and ignorance and disobedience of what's going on in Israel at this time. Because her son steals the money from her, and he fesses up and gives it back, and then she rewards him for stealing the money, basically, by giving him a big chunk of it back. And then with the money, she blesses Yahweh. And how's she going to bless Yahweh? She's going to violate the second commandment by creating an image with the silver that she has received back from her son. So we've already broken the commandment not to steal. We've already broken the commandment to dishonor your father and mother. We've already broken the second commandment, no idols before me. Then you've broken the third commandment, don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain, because she's sworn a curse, and then she's also sworn a blessing, but misused the Lord's name in both. So we're on good track now to break all 10 probably by the end of this chapter. So then in verse 4, when he restored the money to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave it to the silversmith, who made it into a carved image and a metal image, and it was in the house of Micah. And the man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and household gods, and ordained one of his sons, who became his priest. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. All right, that's the big things. Throw it out there for you, because this guy, that's the cue. This guy is way off base. There was no king in Israel, so everybody just did whatever they wanted. And so you can see Micah, where is he from? He's from the hill country of Ephraim. Is he from the house of Aaron? No. So what is he doing ordaining a priest? And his son, no less, who is also not from the clan of Aaron, from the tribe of Levi. So he's totally way outside of his lane, doing things that are incredibly opposed to what God has laid out as far as how to worship is concerned. Now, what we see with this verse, as we've already pointed out in verse 6, is that this points us to the real theme behind the book. The reason why the author is partially writing the book is to get us to the pro-David monarchy, right? Maybe they're writing this during David's reign, possibly. It's probably a little bit later when the kingdom splits. So you have David's house in the southern kingdom, and you have all the other 10 tribes in the northern kingdom. So the author's trying to get you to stay on David's side, to point to the necessity for a Davidic king. And now that ultimately is pointing us to Jesus, right? It's through David to Jesus that points us. Now in verse 7, there was a young man of Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. And the man departed from the town of Bethlehem in Judah to sojourn where he could find a place. And as he journeyed, he came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. Now what's going on as the Levites? Did the Levites have an inheritance in Israel? No, right? So he's sojourning, right? He's traveling around Israel to these little towns and locations, providing Levitical services. And so he sojourns in Bethlehem, and he continues to sojourn throughout Israel, and he finally comes to the place where Micah is. And then in verse 9, and Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he said to him, "I'm a Levite of Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm going to sojourn where I may find a place." And Micah said to him, "Stay with me, and be to me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year and a suit of clothes and your living." And the Levite went in. And the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. And Micah ordained the Levite, and the young man became his priest and was in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, "Now I know that Yahweh will prosper me because I have a Levite as priest." All right, now there's a couple of things that are shocking in these verses, but really probably the most shocking sentence is at the end of verse 10 when it says, "And the Levite went in." That's like, what? He knows this guy and what he's asking him to do. He should have been like, "Get out of here. No way, I'm not doing that." But the Levite went in, and Micah's going to take good care of him. But we see the motivation behind Micah is in verse 13. He's superstitious, and he thinks that the reason he's superstitious is he thinks, well, I've got a Levite as a priest. So now Yahweh is going to bless me, all right, because I've got this guy in my house. And this happens in the military a lot with the chaplain. When the chaplain's on the scene, or if he's riding in your helicopter or in your tank, "Oh, now the chaplain's with us, so we're going to be okay." Well, that's not always the case, but that's the superstitious part of things, right? So the same thing's happening here with Micah. Now I've got a Levite, so Yahweh will prosper me. So he's superstitious and thinks that that's going to work with Yahweh in spite of all the things that he's already done. Now, this sets us up for what's going to happen in chapter 18 as we move. We're going to continue with the story of the Levite. Micah's going to come back into the story towards the end. But what we're going to see happen in chapter 18 is a continued deepening of this darkness. Because right now, this is just between a one household family, Micah and his family, and this Levite. But now we're going to move in chapter 18 from just one family to an entire tribe. So the darkness is going to spread. So chapter 18 verse 1 starts with the same phrase. "In those days there was no king in Israel. And in those days the tribe of the people of Dan was seeking for itself an inheritance to dwell in. For until then no inheritance among the tribe of Israel had fallen to them." Now to start off this next section with the same phrase, they're saying, hey, in those days there was no king in Israel. And so that's supposed to, all right, something's about to happen. Yeah, right? Something's about to happen. So now we move to the tribe of Dan, and it says, "Oh, poor Dan, they were seeking an inheritance," because at this point they didn't have any. Well, the reason they're seeking an inheritance, if we go back to chapter 1 of Judges, we read that they were pressed hard by the Amorites and the Philistines, and they didn't conquer the land like they were supposed to. So if you look at the map on the back of your handout, this is the reason why I included the map. It's a little hard to see. It didn't come out great. But if you see Deborah's name, and if you move from Deborah over to the coast, just south of that is where Dan, the inheritance of Dan, is allotted. You see that? It's a dark shaded area. It's hard to see the name Dan right there, but it's right here in this area. Here's where Dan is. Just south of Dan, you see the 5 cities of the Philistines: Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. So the Philistines are pushing in against Dan. The Amorites also are involved in pushing Dan out of their allotted area. And Dan, instead of conquering them like God told them to do, they're saying this is too hard. So they're going to wander off and go find an inheritance elsewhere, is what we're going to see happen. So in verse 2, starting in verse 2, to see if this sounds familiar to you. It should sound familiar to you from another passage of Scripture. "So the people of Dan sent 5 able men from the whole number of their tribe, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to explore it. And they said to them, 'Go and explore the land.' And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. When they were by the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite." Now, let's pause there. Already, this should take you back to the conquest, right? Sending the tribes out the spies out into the land to spy it out so they can come in and conquest it. What is Dan doing, redoing this all over again? They already did all that. He knew where he was supposed to go. That tribe was supposed to conquer this area. They're not doing it. Let's go find somewhere else to make our inheritance so that we don't have to deal with these guys that are already here. Now, it says that, this is interesting, it says that they recognize the voice of the young Levite. Now, one of two things could be happening here. Either Zorah and Eshtaol is only 12 miles away from Jerusalem. So maybe somehow there's been some kind of interaction with the Levite at some point, and they actually personally know the guy. So that when they hear his voice, they say, oh, that's Jonathan. We know him. Or it means that they recognize his dialect, or he said y'all when he was talking or something. They said, oh, I know where he's from. Right? So maybe they recognize that he's from southern Israel because he's from Bethlehem and Judea and the tribe of Judah. And so maybe that's what's going on here. But something cues him in that he's somebody they know or is from a different area. And so they turned aside to him and said to him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here? And he said to them, this is how Micah dealt with me. He has hired me and I have become his priest. And they said to him, inquire of God, please, that we may know whether the journey on which we are setting out will succeed. And the priest said to them, go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of Yahweh. Then the five men departed and came to Laish. Now look again on the map. Here's Dan. Laish is right here, all the way at the top of your map. It's hard to see it, but right next, just to the left or to the right of Shamgar's box is Laish. So that's how far away they have gone from their allotted territory. And they departed and came to Laish and saw the people who were there, how they lived in security after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and unsuspecting, lacking nothing that is in the earth and possessing wealth, and how they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealings with anyone. And when they came to their brothers at Zorah and Eshtaol, their brothers said to them, what do you report? And they said, arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. And will you do nothing? Do not be slow to go, to enter in and possess the land. As soon as you go, you will come to an unsuspecting people. The land is spacious, for God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is in the earth. So 600 men of the tribe of Dan, armed with weapons of war, set out from Zorah and Eshtaol, and went up and encamped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. On this account, that place is called Mahana Dan, which means the camp of Dan to this day. Behold, it is west of Kiriath Jearim. And they passed on from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. Then the 5 men who had gone to scout out the country of Laish said to their brothers, do you know that in their houses there are an ephod, household gods, a carved image, and a metal image? Now therefore consider what you will do. And they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite at the home of Micah, and asked him about his welfare. Now the 600 men of the Danites, armed with their weapons of war, stood by the entrance of the gate, and the 5 men who had gone to scout out the land went up and entered and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image, while the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with the weapons of war. And when these went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image, the priest said to them, what are you doing? And they said to him, keep quiet, put your hand on your mouth and come with us, and be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for you to be priest to the house of one man, or to be priest to a tribe and clan in Israel? And the priest's heart was glad. He took the ephod and the household gods and the carved image and went along with the people. Now we see the motivation of the priest, or the Levite. He was glad, right? He's prospering now. He's got the prestige. He's got the glory and honor for himself, moving up his ladder of success, right? So not only is Micah's motivation thwarted or crooked, so is the Levites here. And verse 21, so they turned and departed, putting the little ones and the livestock and the goods in front of them. They do that on purpose so that the military guys are on the back to protect in case Micah comes after them to try to retrieve everything that they've just stolen. So they're putting a wall of themselves between what they've just stolen and the possibility of somebody coming after them. Verse 22, when they had gone a distance from the home of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house were called out, and they overtook the people of Dan. And they shouted to the people of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, what is the matter with you that you come with such a company? And he said, you take my gods that I made and the priest and go away, and what have I left? How then do you ask me, what is the matter with you? And the people of Dan said to him, do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows fall upon you and you lose your life with the lives of your household. Then the people of Dan went their way. And when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his home. But the people of Dan took what Micah had made and the priests who belonged to him, and they came to Laish, to a people quiet and unsuspecting, and struck them with the edge of the sword, and burned the city with fire. And there was no deliverer, there's our word, there was no savior, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob. Then they rebuilt the city and lived in it. Now I want to pause here for a second, because there's something going on here that is maybe a violation of the covenant. When God told the Israelites to come into the land, he listed specific peoples that he wanted them to conquer and drive out and destroy. But he didn't say to conquer and drive out and destroy every people group. Now, if you look on the map and you see how far north these people in Laish are, they're kind of on the frontier, all right? No walled cities. They're out there and living a peaceful, quiet life. It's possible that this is a people group that's not described by God that the Israelites are to wipe out. But Dan's not concerned with that. They see these quiet country folk, and they're going to come in and lay the sword to them and totally destroy and wipe them out. And that's exactly what they do. No concern whatsoever for who these people are, that they should even be the recipients of such a raid. Now, the second thing that's interesting here is that the Danites take these idols and move them up with them into Laish. Now, we're going to see in this next verse, 29, they named the name of the city Dan after the name of their ancestor Dan, who was born to Israel. But the name of the city was Laish before. Now this, from the time that the people are reading this for the first time when the author writes it, the kingdom splits, and who is in charge of the northern kingdom of Israel when it splits? You've got Rehoboam in the southern kingdom, the son of Jeroboam is in the northern kingdom. Now, he doesn't want people going down to Jerusalem to worship. So what does he do? He sets up an idol in Dan in the north. And do you remember what the idol is? A golden calf. Good job, Jeroboam. Sets up a golden calf idol in Dan in the north. So Dan becomes the center of idolatry for the northern kingdom of Israel, starting here. Jeroboam takes advantage of this history, and that's where he makes the capital for the worship of the northern kingdom of Israel. Now that's kind of shocking, but here comes the jaw dropper, all right? This is intentionally here for you to end the story by going, all right, here we go, verse 30. The people of Dan set up the carved image for themselves, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. Who was the Levite? It was Moses' grandson, Jonathan. So here we have the name of the Levite. So even Moses' own family has been infected with idolatry and this deep spiritual darkness that's taking place in Israel at the time. And so as you read along, it's like, oh man, that Levite, he's a bad guy. But then it's like, oh, it's Moses' grandson. And this is so shocking that the scribes actually changed the name of Moses throughout history to Manasseh. It was too shocking for them. So as we look at the manuscripts of this book throughout history, it's clear that the original is Moses. But we have these little copies here and there where they change a letter so that it now becomes Manasseh instead of Moses. They don't want this to be the case, that Moses' family is infected with this idolatry. That's how shocking it is, right? So there's this little attempt to change the name there at different points throughout scribal history. So Moses' own family is involved in the darkness. So in verse 31, they set up Micah's carved image that he has made, and as long as the house of God was at Shiloh. Now there's an important phrase here that we looked at when we first looked at the beginning of the book, and it was they kept it there until the captivity of the land. What captivity are they talking about? It's not the captivity of the southern kingdom of Israel in 586 BC. That's not what they're talking about. Possibly it could be the captivity of the northern kingdom of Israel by the Assyrians in 722. But most likely what's talked about here is the Philistines when they came in and took the Ark of the Covenant. In 1 Samuel chapter 4, they come in and they kill Eli's sons and they take the Ark of the Covenant. That's most likely what's being talked about here when it says that they were there until the day of the captivity of the land.
The whole land, or just all the way up to Laish then? Or is that talking about until the time of the captivity of the land? Or are they talking about?
You're talking about the first captivity of Israel?
No, what we're talking about is, if you look at 1 Samuel chapter 4, the Philistines and the Israelites come into battle together. And the Philistines are making strong incursions into Israel, capture the Ark of the Covenant, and that's a major event in Israel's history. So the phrase captivity of the land actually could be, there's one little letter that would change it to captivity of the Ark. And that's probably what's being spoken of here. All right, we got to stop here. But you can see, as far as the outline is concerned, we are in deep religious corruption at this point. Even Moses' own line has been corrupted by the idolatry of the judges at this time. So we'll hit chapters 19 through 21 next time as we look at the moral corruption of Israel. You've been listening to lesson number 9 in our Sunday School series on the book of Judges, Micah and the Levite, from chapters 17 and 18.